The battles of former titans who roamed the surface of our planet, territory, cattle, land, and everything else that comes with it was crucial in that period, and great battles were fought over it, bigger than you can imagine. We will not talk about drones, automatic rifles and tanks. Here, everything was done the old-fashioned way, where courage and the will to survive were needed the most. As much as wars have been fought for the sake of natural resources, they are also the sake of survival. Here, the fighters just survive and rule the land. One of the bloodiest and longest-lasting conflicts in Native American history involved the Apache and Comanche. They engaged in battle as sworn rivals in what the Spanish in Mexico referred to as a War of Extermination. The Eastern Apache had developed a robust foothold in the southern Great Plains by the late 1500s. The region provided them with space to engage in agriculture as well as excellent buffalo hunting grounds. At the same time, less strong clans drove the Comanche, who were outcasts, into difficult terrain. Like the Apache, they had a violent and vindictive society, but in the middle of the 1600s, their greatest opponent brought about a significant transition that would make them the most dominant native tribe in American history. Due to their success in Mexico in the 1500s, the Spanish had a persistent ambition to conquer. It was sort of what they did. Up until they reached Apache land, Europeans had been moving steadily north and had kept up their colonization and influence efforts. When they migrated into the region of current New Mexico around 1600, they carried with them metal armor firearms and a large number of horses. They swiftly conquered several native communities in the area with their obscene power. Just like they had done in Central and South America over the preceding 100 years, they compelled people to convert to Christianity and work for them as payment. Less polite were the neighboring Apache though. These new Spanish villages were attacked fiercely by the Apache, who also took their horses. They learned how to ride them while closely observing the Spanish. The Apache were leading horseback raids by the 1650s. The horses' increased speed made it even more lethal and efficient. The region's Spanish population could no longer put up with the continuous harassment. After killing anybody who stood in their way, the Apache would vanish into the American West with hundreds of horses and other supplies. When Apache wrath reached its peak in 1680, the Pueblo gave up on Spanish protection and revolted, driving the Spanish out of New Mexico, while 1,000 of their horses fled. Mustangs are a kind of horse that thrives on the Great Plains. The Apache continued to raid the Spanish regularly as land was lost and recovered, but in 1706, seemingly overnight, their behavior changed. The raids on them had stopped, and the Spanish had started to notice this. The Apache are behaving oddly. Bands like the Mescaleros and the Jicarilla appear to be fleeing the lowlands, quickly leaving their fields and villages behind. The Apache were engaged in battle, but the Spanish had no idea who they were up against. They were warned of northern invaders who rode horses and were powerful, quick, and lethal. The Apache were so decimated by the 1720s that several tribes had relocated totally into the highlands, or even requested safety from the Spanish. Some bands didn't get very far. Spanish expeditions discovered that plain-dwelling Apache bands like the Farones, Calanes, and Palomas had been completely driven out and wiped off by an adversary that they were unable to even name. So what was killing the Apache? The Utes provide the response. The phantom invaders in the north were known as the Comanche. Its native meaning was those who are always against me, which was a fitting description for the people the Spanish later came to refer to as the Comanche. The Comanche are frequently characterized historically as being fairly unimpressive. The other tribes in the area, particularly the Apache, bullied them. They will not forget that during their ascent to power. The horse was then discovered in the middle of the 17th century, seemingly as a gift from the gods. The same horses that the Apache harassment of the Pueblo in Spanish resulted in the release of. They were a breed that was ideal for plains. The horse had sprung off like wildfire in the 2 decades that followed the Spanish retreat from New Mexico. It's called the Great Horse Dispersal. The Comanche accomplished it better than the other tribes in the area, who all began to use them. They started off differently by learning how to breed horses. Other tribes made no effort. Raids netted them their horses, but not the Comanche. They brought what they had: Horses were used as currency on plains, and the Comanches were wealthy. However, something set them apart from the other tribes. They battled while riding. As infantry, they weren't very skilled fighters and could be matched by anybody, but when mounted, they transform into great warriors. They would lean sideways on the horse to get cover from him while shooting their arrows with amazing accuracy. They planned so meticulously that they never stayed in the same spot twice. The tale involving the Apache tribe is different. They became very predictable and their combat style was outdated. From 1706 until around 1800 years, the two groups were at war with one another. The only thing that is definite is that every Comanche has turned into an enemy of every Apache. After this, Apache had to adopt a new plan of action. The Apache tribe traveled to San Antonio in 1749 to sign a peace agreement with the Spanish. The Spanish were thrilled by this since, up until that point, the Apache tribe had mistreated them, repeatedly plundered them, and kidnapped several children and women from them. They had just one goal in mind, and that is to make a mission in the middle of what was then believed to be the center of Apache territory in San Saba, but which eventually proved to be Comanche territory instead. Beginning on March 16, the Comanche tribe arrived at those gates ready for blood, joined by a number of other tribes. A short while afterwards, there was a slaughter. They vanished completely 2 days later. The Spanish eventually dispatched an expedition to the Comanche tribe, but it ended in disaster. Everyone, including the Apache, started to fear the Comanche as they grew stronger. The Spanish have had enough of that, and after being continuously attacked by the Apache and Comanche, they have made up their minds. They benefited from the fact that both sides are at war, Comanche and Apache. Don Juan Batista de Anza, an officer during that time, gained their respect by leading successful raids on a few smaller Comanche settlements. To get their message through, a couple of captives were released. The letter said that the Spanish could always make peace with the Comanches, but in exchange, they wanted to meet. The meeting was held in Taos. At the end of the meeting, they agreed on 3 things. The first is that the Comanche will not attack the Spanish. The second is that they can trade freely between them. And the third is that they team up against their common enemies, the Apaches. In January 1790, Spanish General Juan de Ugalde leads a huge group of Spanish and Comanche warriors into battle. Hundreds of Apache warriors were killed in the canyon west of San Antonio. After the defeat of the Apache tribe, they had less than 1,000 warriors left, and in a hurry, they left all the land they had on the fringes of Comancheria and retreated to the mountains. The Comanches are once again back on the throne, where they once again become the strongest tribe, and the Spanish are happier after this, because their great opponent, the Apache tribe, has been removed for good. In the past, things were valued differently than today, and the importance of a real fighter was known. You had to be at the top of the food chain to survive. If you like this video and want more content like this, hit that like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching!